Hello, my name is Kate Passion, and I'm going to be presenting on the counterculture of witches. So according to dictionary.com, a witch is defined as a woman thought to have magic powers, especially evil ones, popularly depicted as wearing a black cloak and pointed hat and flying on a broomstick. Another definition says a person, and especially a woman, believed to have magic powers. And the third definition says an ugly or a mean old woman, not even needing to be magical. So as you can tell, a lot of the stereotypes about witches are inherently negative. We think of the pop culture depiction of the Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz as someone with green skin and warts and a big pointy nose. They usually wear a pointy hat and all black. We see them as mean and evil and old. Usually they're only women, never men. And they live in the woods on the outskirts of society or in a cave. They can control the weather. They fly on broomsticks. Society has depicted them as devil worshippers and usually in cahoots with Satan. We still believe those things to be true, mainly as a society today. And one of the biggest misconceptions is that witches operate only in the context of Wiccan, and Wiccans are usually seen as devil worshippers. Neither one of these things are true. Witches can be a lot of different things. And you'll find as you learn more about witchcraft that most of these stereotypes are in fact false. Many of our stereotypes come from Western culture. However, witches have been around all over the world from the dawn of time. 1700 Europe imprisoned 100,000 to 200,000 accused witches and executed about half of those people, some of them being children, women, and men. Witches go all the way back to the Bible, even in the book of 1 Samuel, when one of the kings called upon the witch of Endor to come and help bring someone back to life in order to help them win a battle. They talk about witchcraft lots of other places in the Bible as well, which leads us to believe that it's been happening for a very, very long time. Early Europe, even in the 1400s, had their first witch trials, killing over 80,000 accused, which the Salem witch trials began in the States in 1692 and had our own series of witch trials, even beginning as early as 1647. So a brief history of witchcraft. In biblical times up until the 17th century, witches were seen as mystical and strange, sometimes not even human creatures that could speak to the dead and control supernatural forces. This is where we get the ideas that they control the weather and things like that. Every culture passed down different folklore of varying degrees of the witches who lived on the outskirts of society. It's always been considered taboo and kept hidden away, but it's largely been misunderstood. This quote here is from history.com, where it talks about the history of witches. And this talks about a book that was released in 1486 by reputable people, which was essentially just a guide on how to hunt witches within society. So this book, Malleus Maleficarum, labeled witchcraft as heresy and quickly became the authority for Protestants and Catholics trying to flush out witches living among them. For more than 100 years, the book sold more copies of any other book in Europe except for the Bible. So really, religious indoctrination and religious abuse is what spurred the witch trials and everything else about the inherent negative beliefs about witches. Witch hunts were efforts to identify witches rather than pursuits of individuals who were already thought to be witches. So essentially, they were trying to find witches where there weren't any. Witches were considered to be followers of Satan who had traded their souls for his assistance, which is why they were able to justify all of the horrible things they did to these people. They didn't believe them to be people, first of all, and they believed that they were in cahoots with Satan. It was believed they employed demons to accomplish magical deeds, that they changed from human form to animal form and other things. So the process of identifying witches began with suspicious rumors and accusations followed, then often escalating to convictions and executions. This was before the days of a fair trial. So single women, widows, and other women and marginalized members of society were often targeted because they wanted to be eradicated. Essentially, they wanted to eradicate them. Modern day witches couldn't be further from what people believe them to be. Today's witch community is built upon guiding principles of harming nobody and supporting social justice. You might see things like terminology like white witches or light witches. These are terminology that have come about specifically to combat all of the negative stereotypes and the concept that witches are evil. Witches around the world follow various forms of peaceful pagan traditions that encompass a variety of spiritual practices. A lot of pagan traditions that have been part of our culture for a long time have been used by religion to control and isolate marginalized groups of society and to completely tear apart those cultures and make them seem like there's something evil, when in reality, they are things that we practiced for a very long time. They have never involved performing magic or spells with negative intent or worshiping Satan. In fact, witches do not even acknowledge the existence of Satan. This is a very common misconception. It varies from witch to witch, but historically, witches have been guided by pre-Christian gods and goddesses. They really worship nature as a whole. So some of the behavioral norms for what witches do and don't do, like I said, witches respect nature and the elements. They use that to manipulate the energy and cast spells. Witches believe in the threefold rule, which is that what you put out energetically will come back to you in threefold. So that doesn't mean that people won't use witchcraft for harm, because they might. However, they do know that with the use of using a spell against for someone's harm or for negative intent in general, will come back to them in threefold energetically. So it's not something that's done carelessly. Usually witchcraft is used for the good of humanity. Witches do not have to dress in all black or wear pointy hats. In fact, they can wear whatever they want to do, whatever they would like to wear. Witches do not need to operate in a coven either, which is a group of witches, to practice their magic. In fact, they can fall into many different categories in their practice. A few examples are Wiccan, like we covered earlier, coven-based, solitary, meaning you practice alone, crystal witches, meaning you use rock and crystals in your practices, cosmic witch, meaning you use astrology and the stars, green witch, meaning you use plants. There's a lot of different variety of witches. Some of this information that I got comes actually from Salem.com, which describes witches in modern day. The language of witches. So all of the graphics that you see below with some of the common terms that you hear in witchcraft come from an Instagram account called Witchy Tips. This is somebody who is an out of the closet witch who is happy to give information across all different platforms. And they've given us some of these definitions here. Like a coven, I mentioned, is a group or gathering of witches who meet regularly and perform their magic together. Things like intent and manifest. These are words that are making their way into mainstream society as we hear. It's really just witchcraft is essentially just the manipulation of energy to create the reality that you want to create. And that's what manifesting is, turning a thought into action and reality. Intention is giving an action, an item or thought determined purpose. There's another example of something like an altar. This is something most witches keep within their home or their workspace, which is a sacred place for a witch to perform a spell, work, or meditate and focus on energy. A lot of times it's just a small little table that holds a candle and the representative items that you're using in your spell. One of the common questions that comes up when people start to research witchcraft is wondering if spells always have to rhyme, as it seems that they do when you're looking things up on the internet. This is a misconception. Spells do not have to rhyme. It's just a very common form of doing so. One of the thoughts behind this is that it's easy to pass down information when witches are passing down to their children or their ancestors. It's also a really easy way for things to stick in your mind and give the intention more power behind it. So no, it's not necessary, but it is a lot more fun to include rhyming in spell. Symbols are used heavily in witchcraft. In fact, most spell work is done with a combination of different symbols. There are some common ones, like the ones you see across the bottom. The first one is a triangle with a line through it, which is the elemental sign for air. When the symbol is flipped upside down, it stands for earth. The one next to it is an Anki, which is a symbol from ancient Egypt used to direct the flow of energy. You see a Celtic knot after that, which is a protection shield. The Eye of Ra, a pentacle, comes after that. And each one really dictates where the flow of energy is supposed to go and what they're supposed to mean. However, you can put any kind of intention into it that you want. This last one that you see with a star, a pentacle, a lot of the common meanings for this is that each point represents a different thing. One of the points, each point represents a different element, and then the fifth point represents spirit or self. So you can use this when doing your spell work to create the intention that you want to create for what you want to do. There's something also called a sigil, which is used, which is essentially just a message that is encrypted into a symbol that only the user knows what it means. And whenever that person looks at it or uses it, they are bringing that intention into their awareness and making it magnified. So witchcraft, like I said, is very individualized. It's very personal. And so symbols will really change and shift depending on what the intention of the user is. But like I said, it's usually used to establish the flow of energy and what is supposed to happen and how the subconscious is supposed to interpret it. So in counterculture today, witches are not persecuted like they have been for centuries. However, it's still not socially acceptable. Because of this, lots of witches remain in the broom closet for fear of being exposed. Now, they may not fear death or witch trials today. However, it's something that witches fear being ostracized or being pushed to the outskirts of society for. It's not fully socially acceptable. And because of the internet and the ease of being able to access knowledge right away and being able to personify whoever you want to personify, it's quite easy for witches to remain in the broom closet and still maintain their anonymity in their regular life. So many witches participate in things like communities such as Witch Talk, or they follow witch fluencers, which are communities on the internet that are meant for educating other witches and educating people who are interested in learning more about witchcraft. And a lot of these people are out of the broom closet and don't have any problem with people seeing them and learning from them. However, there are many people who even have podcasts with fake names because they don't want people to find out who they are and that they're actually a witch. So this is a big part of the culture, is still keeping it a secret and keeping it very private. While it is becoming very mainstream through the internet, it's still something that people don't like to talk about in their everyday life. So, but while there's so many witches within our community, and you might even have a witch in your life, you probably don't know it, and you maybe never will unless it's something that you start to explore for yourself. So, with all that, I hope that you guys learned something interesting about witchcraft today and that you think about it a little bit differently than you might have in the past. And thank you for your time.